Have you ever wondered why so many young men today are obsessed with becoming cold, emotionless, stoic machines, like Thomas Shelby, like Patrick Bateman, like some version of a stone-hearted warrior walking through life untouched? Could it be that this obsession is actually a cry from the unconscious? A shadow in disguise? Welcome to the channel. If you've ever felt the silent pressure to not feel, to always be in control, to hide your inner chaos behind a mask of strength, then this video is for you. Make sure to subscribe, like, and comment your thoughts below, because what we're about to explore is more than a trend. It's a cultural wound. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to recognize the invisible patterns that are shaping how we, as men, show up in the world. What if trying to be stoic is actually what's keeping you stuck? Let's be honest, there's something seductive about the image of the man who doesn't flinch. The quiet, brooding anti-hero who stares into the abyss and never blinks. But behind that cold stare, behind Thomas Shelby's haunting silence or Walter White's tight-lipped control, there's something else. A deep pain. A trauma. A disconnection. And when we try to imitate that exterior without understanding the inner wound, we risk becoming shells of ourselves, not strong, but numb. As Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So here's the question. Are you truly mastering your emotions, or are you just suppressing them? Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you won't just see Thomas Shelby differently, you might finally begin to see yourself. So why do so many men crave to become these emotionless, unshakable, versions of masculinity? Why do we sabotage what we most deeply long for, connection, authenticity, inner peace, by wearing a mask of icy indifference? The truth is, coldness is not strength. It's often a defense mechanism rooted in fear. As Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, whoever fights monsters should see to it that he does not become a monster. In our effort to avoid being weak, we begin to reject the very emotions that make us human. Carl Jung believed that every man carries a shadow, a part of himself that he refuses to see, a collection of repressed fears, vulnerabilities, and longings. When we idolize characters like Thomas Shelby, we're often projecting our own shadows onto them. We don't see their trauma, we see control. We don't see their despair, we see power. But Thomas isn't strong because he doesn't feel. He's haunted, broken, driven by ghosts he never processed. The danger is when we confuse emotional numbness with emotional mastery. There's a reason so many of us avoid silence. Silence forces us to meet ourselves. In the noise of life, in the calculated poses we adopt, we can pretend. But in silence, the unconscious starts to speak. And what it says often terrifies us. That's why, as Viktor Frankl observed, when a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. Or in this case, with performance, the performance of the cold, always in control man. But underneath, there's often a boy who was never taught how to feel without shame. Our culture trains men to see emotion as weakness. So instead of channeling emotion into purpose, we learn to suppress it. Instead of using anger as fuel for justice, or sadness as a doorway to connection, we numb it all, thinking that's the path to power. But as Gabor Maté warns, the attempt to escape from pain, is what creates more pain. The patterns we carry, passed down through silence, reinforced by media, modeled by misunderstood characters, are not strength. They're symptoms. And until we confront those invisible patterns, they will keep defining our choices, our relationships, and our self-worth without us even realizing it. Now pause for a moment, and ask yourself, where did this idea come from, that you must be cold to be respected? Who told you that feeling deeply was a weakness? Was it your father, who couldn't hold his own sadness? Was it school, where vulnerability got mocked? Or maybe it was the world itself, which rewarded the quiet, the hardened, the emotionally detached. You see, the problem isn't just that you've tried to be emotionless. The problem is that you don't even remember who taught you that was the only way to survive. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The truth is, you've probably been wearing a mask for so long, you started to think it was your face. But here's the paradox: the more you suppress your emotions, the more they control you from the shadows. That unexplained rage. That emptiness you feel even after achieving something. That numbness in relationships. It's not coming from the outside world, it's coming from within, from wounds left untouched, from needs that were never met. Gabor Maté, in his work on trauma and addiction, reminds us, the question is never, why the addiction, but why the pain? Your addiction to control, to being untouchable, to never letting them see you break, it's not about strength. It's about pain. It's about a younger version of you who learned to armor up because it wasn't safe to just be. And the tragedy is, the more you bury him, the more you lose access to your essence. Because the same place where your pain lives, is the place where your power begins. We all want to be admired, respected, even feared. But what if you're chasing admiration for a version of you that's not even real? What if the cold, calculating exterior you've built is actually a cage, and the door is wide open, but you're too afraid to walk out because you don't know who you'll be without it? Real strength isn't in suppression. Real power is in integration. In facing your darkness, not pretending it doesn't exist. As Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So now I ask you, are you brave enough to stop performing? Are you willing to sit with the discomfort long enough to hear what your soul is trying to say? Because healing doesn't come from pretending you're fine. It comes from finally being honest. And maybe, just maybe, the version of you you've been avoiding is the one that holds the key to everything you've been chasing. Here's the truth no one tells you: there is no shortcut to wholeness. No magic formula. No alpha mindset that can fix the emptiness inside. Real transformation doesn't come from trying to become a character, it comes from finally becoming yourself. And that journey doesn't begin with control or strategy. It begins with honest self-inquiry. With the courage to ask yourself, what have I been running from feeling? The moment you stop escaping and start listening, things begin to shift. When you look inward, really look, you might find fear, guilt, and grief. But you'll also discover something more profound: your buried power. Your capacity to love without walls, to lead without fear, to live with depth instead of defense. As Viktor Frankl once said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose. That space is where consciousness is born, not from reaction, but from reflection. To face your emotions is not weakness, it's one of the highest forms of courage. When you can feel your anger without being controlled by it, cry without shame, admit you're lost without falling apart, you're not breaking, you're coming back home. That is where true self-mastery begins. Not with suppression, but with channeling. Emotions are not enemies to be defeated, they are signals to be understood. Gabor Maté teaches that repression doesn't heal anything, it only delays the pain. And what is unhealed becomes destiny. The man who represses becomes rigid. The man who avoids becomes reactive. But the man who integrates his pain becomes whole. He becomes grounded. He becomes trustworthy, not because he hides his inner world, but because he knows how to walk through it with awareness. So here is the invitation: turn inward. Sit with the parts of yourself you've been taught to reject. Name your wounds. Hold your pain without judgment, without drama. Just presence. Just clarity. Just responsibility. It won't be easy. But it will be real. And in the end, that's what matters most, not to look strong, but to be whole. Maybe the real strength isn't found in becoming untouchable, but in daring to stay open, even when it hurts. Maybe the journey isn't about becoming more like a fictional version of strength, but about unlearning everything that taught you to be afraid of your own heart. What if the man you're trying to be is already inside you, waiting for your permission to show up with truth? So here's your invitation: as you move through the rest of your day, watch yourself. Watch how you react when you're challenged, how quickly you shut down when you're hurt, how often you reach for distraction when discomfort rises. These small moments hold big truths. They reveal the unconscious stories running the show. And the first step toward transformation is simply to become aware. To observe without judgment. That's how the patterns begin to break. If this message stirred something inside you, like the feeling of remembering something you didn't know you'd forgotten, then don't keep it to yourself. Like the video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and send this to someone who's been trying to be strong by staying silent. You never know whose life might shift because of one honest conversation. And remember, if this content spoke to you, watch the video that's about to appear on your screen. It might be exactly what your soul needed to hear today.